The Galactic Council's message reached Earth on a Tuesday. Admiral Vera Torrens watched the holographic display materialize above the council chambers, its blue-white glow casting sharp shadows across the faces of humanity's last defenders. The alien script translated itself into sterile diplomatic language that couldn't quite mask the underlying contempt. The Terran quarantine has been lifted. Your species' probationary period is concluded. Integration will commence immediately. 27 years. 27 years since first contact. Since humanity discovered they were the galactic equivalent of unruly children to violent, to unpredictable, to dangerous to join civilized society. The Council had built an energy barrier around Sol system, trapping 4 billion humans inside while the galaxy moved on without them. Now they wanted Earth's resources, the rare element deposits, the strategic positioning, but not the humans. Integration, Director Kane Osterholm said, his weathered face grim as he read the full document. They're offering to relocate our population to 3 designated worlds, agricultural colonies. No technology above pre-industrial levels. Torrens felt ice in her veins, and if we refuse, they've declared us a persistent galactic threat. The hegemony fleets are already mobilizing. Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum, Torrens could see the orbital defense platforms humanity had spent decades building. Fusion reactors, particle beam arrays, kinetic bombardment systems, all powered by desperation and the knowledge that isolation meant death by slow strangulation. The Council had expected them to weaken and surrender. Instead, humanity had prepared for war. The hologram shifted, displaying fleet compositions that made Torrens' stomach drop. 200 hegemony dreadnoughts, 800 cruisers, countless support vessels from 17 different species, all united in their certainty that humanity needed to be controlled or eliminated. Against Earth's 63 operational warships, Communications Officer Lyra Vasquez's voice cracked slightly. We're receiving similar messages from Luna Base, Mars Command, and the outer colonies. They want a response within 48 hours. Torrens closed her eyes, thinking of her daughter's children, probably playing in the New Geneva biodomes right now, unaware that their world was about to burn. The Council expected capitulation. They'd studied human psychological profiles, determined that faced with extinction, humanity would choose survival over dignity. They were wrong. Send the response, Torrens said quietly. Mom, tell them we refuse their generous offer. She opened her eyes, and Osterholm saw something there that made him step backward. Tell them that if they want Earth, they can come and take it. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Outside, automated factories continued their relentless production, churning out weapons and armor for soldiers who might not live to use them. In the depths of the Mariana Trench, humanity's final project, codenamed Lazarus, waited in its reinforced bunkers. The Council expected another colonial uprising. Easily crushed by superior numbers and technology, they expected desperate humans to throw themselves uselessly against energy shields and plasma cannons. They had no idea what desperation had taught humanity to become. How long until the first hegemony scouts reached the outer system? Torrens asked. 72 hours. Admiral. Then we have 72 hours to remind them why they were afraid enough to quarantine us in the first place. She turned to face the assembled officers, her voice carrying the weight of species-level determination. Send word to all commands. Operation Funeral Pyre is now active. In the depths of space beyond Pluto's orbit, ancient human warning buoys began broadcasting on all frequencies messages. In every known galactic language, the translations were simple, clinical, and utterly terrifying. You are entering the Sol quarantine zone. This system is defended by Terran military forces. Turn back now. This is your only warning. The galaxy had celebrated humanity's isolation, secure in their moral superiority. They were about to learn the difference between civilization and survival. The hegemony's advanced fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a plague of metallic locusts. Admiral Vexitar of the Kelveran Empire commanded the Vanguard 12 dreadnoughts at 40 escort vessels, their hulls gleaming with ceremonial markings that proclaimed their moral authority. To the cosmos, this was meant to be a police action, a brief, decisive demonstration of power to cow the primitives into submission. The humans were waiting. Captain Marcus Delgado watched the alien formation through the sensor displays of his stealth Corvette Wrathchild, one of 15 ships lying dormant in the asteroid belt's shadow. His crew of 18 had volunteered for this mission knowing it was suicide. The hegemony vessels outmassed them 50-1. Numbers had never stopped humans before. Torplogger controlled all Phantom units. Came the encrypted transmission. Target designations uploading now. Remember, we're not here to win. We're here to teach them fear. Delgado's tactical display lit up with enemy positions. The Kelvin ships moved in perfect formation, energy shields synchronized. Their confidence radiating across the void. They expected token resistance at best. All stations. This is Phantom Lead. Delgado broadcast to his squadron. Light them up. 15 human ships dropped their stealth field simultaneously, unleashing concentrated fury. Not the clean, energy-based weapons the galaxy preferred, but crude, vicious kinetic rounds accelerated to relativistic speeds. Depleted uranium slugs wrapped in antimatter casings, each one carrying the explosive power of strategic nuclear weapons. The first salvo caught the hegemony completely off guard. 3 escort vessels simply ceased to exist. Their elegant hulls vaporized by impacts that registered as brief fusion flares. A dreadnought shields flared and collapsed as 17 separate projectiles struck within milliseconds of each other. Evasive maneuvers. Vexitar screamed, his mandibles clicking in panic as Wrathchild dug beneath his flagship's ventral surface. Spewing clouds of chaff and flares, return fire, all batteries. The hegemony's response was immediate and overwhelming. Plasma cannons and particle beams lanced through space, turning asteroids to vapor and filling the void with deadly energy. But the human ships weren't where they'd been moments before. Delgado's corvette twisted through a debris field, using destroyed mining equipment as cover while his crew prepared their second salvo. Around him, his squadron danced between laser fire with suicidal precision, their pilots screaming war songs over open channels. Phantom 7 is hit. The transmission cut to static as Lieutenant Kowalski's ship tumbled into an asteroid. Reactor core breaching in a miniature sun. Phantom 12. Catastrophic damage. We're going dark. But for every human ship that died, they took something with them. Phantom 12 rammed a Kelvin cruiser at quarter-light speed. The impact splitting the alien vessel in half and sending debris cascading through the formation. The battle lasted 17 minutes when the human survivors finally retreated into the system's depths. They left behind 8 destroyed hegemony vessels and a message beacon floating in the wreckage. Admiral Vexitar activated it with trembling claws. The hologram showed Admiral Torrance, her face calm and professional. To the hegemony fleet commanders, she said, "You have just experienced what we call a friendly greeting. This was 12% of our total defensive capability. You have 72 hours to withdraw beyond the heliopause, or we will be forced to become impolite." Vexitar's threat assessment algorithm screamed warnings. In 17 minutes, a handful of primitive ships had inflicted casualties that should have been impossible. The humans hadn't fought like civilized beings engaged in warfare, they'd fought like cornered animals with nothing left to lose. Sent a priority message to the council. He ordered his communications officer, "Tell them we need reinforcements, many reinforcements, on Earth." Torrance watched the tactical reports with grim satisfaction. The first phase had exceeded expectations. They demonstrated humanity's capacity for violence while gathering crucial intelligence on hegemony tactics and technology. Now came the real test. Hector Osterholm, she said, "Signal all defense platforms. Begin Phase 2 across the solar system." Automated weapon systems came online. Orbital bombardment stations, hidden asteroid bases, and fusion mines planted throughout the outer systems. Shipping lanes, each one controlled by humans who'd had 27 years to contemplate what they'd do. When the galaxy came calling, the hegemony had wanted to police humanity. They were about to discover what policing humans actually required. The second wave arrived. Within 18 hours to 100 warships under Fleet Commander Zylecto of the Triumvirate conquered. The massive armada emerged from hyperspace in perfect battle formation. Their combined mass casting shadows across entire moons. This time, they were ready for human treachery, advanced shields, overlapping fields of fire, sensor networks that could detect a single proton's movement. The hegemony had brought the instruments of civilized warfare to bear against primitive savages. They would demonstrate the folly of resistance through overwhelming force. The demonstration lasted exactly 4 seconds. Commander Elena Vasquez watched from the command center of Ceres Station as her carefully orchestrated trap closed around the enemy fleet, hidden throughout the asteroid belt. Hundreds of fusion mines activated simultaneously not to destroy the ships, but to create an electromagnetic pulse that would disrupt their sensor networks. In those 4 seconds of blindness, humanity's true defense revealed itself. Now, Vasquez whispered, the asteroid belt exploded into motion. What the hegemony had cataloged as dead rocks and mining debris revealed themselves as camouflaged weapons platforms, railgun emplacements that had been disguised as ore processors. Opened fire with shells traveling at 3% of light speed. Missile silos hidden inside hollow asteroids vomited swarms of nuclear-tipped projectiles. And from the depths of the belt itself came the Cerberus, a human dreadnought built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, its surface still covered in mining equipment or deposits. At 8 kilometers long, it dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. It opened fire with weapons that defied galactic warfare conventions. Molecular disruptor cannons charging, reported weapons officer BlackHFY, his hands steady on controls that could unmake matter at the subatomic level, target the command cluster. Full spread, the beams that lanced from Cerberus didn't just penetrate shields, they ignored them entirely, passing through energy barriers like they didn't exist before, striking whole metal and turning it into component atoms. 3 hegemony dreadnoughts simply unraveled, their superstructures dissolving like sugar in acid. Fleet commanders eyed to watch this perfect formation disintegrate in real time. The humans weren't fighting a defensive battle, they were conducting an ambush on a galactic scale. Every piece of debris, every navigation hazard, every innocent mining station had been a weapon waiting for the right moment. Retreat, he ordered, his translator barely keeping up with his species' panic pheromones. Full retreat, all ships, emergency jump, but the humans had planned for retreat as well. Gravity mines hidden throughout the system's edge activated, creating artificial well points that made hyperspace jumps impossible. The hegemony fleet found themselves trapped in a system that had become a killing field, surrounded by enemies who fought with a viciousness that bordered on the psychotic. The running battle lasted 6 hours. Human ships emerged from hiding places throughout the system, hollowed-out moons, camouflaged space stations, even weapons platforms disguised as derelict ships. They struck without warning, inflicted maximum damage, then vanished back into the void before the hegemony could respond effectively. By the time the gravity wells finally dissipated, allowing the survivors to escape, the triumvirate conquered had lost 6 to 7 ships and their faith in technological superiority. On Earth, Admiral Torrens stood before the assembled Defense Council as casualty reports streamed in. Humanity had lost 19 platforms and 11 ships, painful losses, but sustainable ones. The Hegemony Council has declared a full military intervention, Director Osterholm reported, his face grim. Every member species is contributing to the response fleet. Current estimates put their force at over 1,000 vessels. Time frame? 6 days until the first elements arrive. 2 weeks for full deployment. Torrens nodded, unsurprised. They'd always known this moment would come, the point where humanity's defiance would force the galaxy to respond with its full might. The hegemony couldn't allow a single species to resist their authority, not when it might inspire other races to question the established order. Director, signal all colonial installations. Begin emergency evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel. She paused, considering their dwindling options, and activate Lazarus Protocol. Full authorization. Osterholm's face went pale. Admiral, if we deploy Lazarus, there's no going back. The environmental consequences alone, the environmental consequences of extinction are considerably worse. Torrens interrupted. The galaxy wants to see primitive humans fight with primitive weapons. Let's give them exactly what they're expecting. Deep beneath the Mariana Trench, automated systems began awakening humanity's final creation. Project Lazarus, the weapon system they'd hoped never to use. Built from technologies that violated every galactic treaty on prohibited warfare. The hegemony was bringing civilization to bear against humanity. Humanity was about to show them what civilization looked like from the receiving end. The full hegemony armada emerged from hyperspace like an avenging god. 2,300 vessels representing 4 to 7 different species, united in their determination to end humanity's defiance once and for all. Supreme Admiral Korthovex of the Core Worlds commanded from the Bridge of Righteousness Ascendant, a 7-kilometer dreadnought that served as the moral center of galactic civilization. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution, broadcast on all frequencies. Korthovex commanded, his multiple eyes focusing on Earth's blue-white glow. Inform the humans that they have one final opportunity to surrender. After this, we will accept only unconditional capitulation. The response came from Admiral Torrens herself, transmitted from Earth's surface with crystalline clarity. Supreme Admiral HFY, my name is Vera Torrens, and I speak for the human species. Your offer is declined. We choose to remain free. A pause. Then, you may begin your attack at your convenience. We'll be waiting. The transmission ended. HFY felt his secondary heart skip in disbelief. The primitive was treating this like some kind of sporting event rather than a species' final moments. All battle groups advance to optimal firing range. He ordered, prepare for planetary bombardment. What followed defied every tactical simulation the hegemony had run. His massive fleet moved toward Earth. The solar system itself seemed to come alive with hostility. Hidden weapon platforms revealed themselves throughout the asteroid belt. But these weren't the crude kinetic weapons from previous engagements. These were devices that bent the laws of physics in ways that made seasoned warriors weep. Gravitational anomaly detected, screamed the sensor operator aboard Righteousness Ascendant. Multiple sources all around the fleet. The first gravity. Bombs detonated among the hegemony's outer formations, creating localized black holes that lasted just long enough to tear apart anything. Within 50,000 kilometers, entire battle groups vanished into space-time wounds that sealed themselves after consuming everything nearby. But that was just the beginning. From Earth's moon came something that intelligence analysts would later classify as humanity's masterpiece of applied hatred. The Lunar Mortiser weapons platform built into the moon's core, powered by converting lunar mass directly into energy through artificial black hole manipulation. Its first shot carved through 17 ships in a single beam. Evasive maneuvers. HFY ordered, but his fleet was too large, too densely packed. They had expected to overwhelm human defenses through sheer numbers. Instead, those numbers made them a target that couldn't miss. Commander Yuki Tanaka watched from the bridge of Nemesis, one of humanity's deep strike vessels, as she led her squadron through the chaos of the main engagement. Her mission was surgical identify and eliminate the hegemony command ships before they could coordinate an effective response. Target acquired, reported her weapons officer. Hegemony flagship, bearing 27 for Mark 18, range for 100,000 kilometers. Fire, Tanaka ordered. The torpedo that streaked toward Righteousness Ascendant wasn't filled with convent ional explosives. It was filled with nanomachine self-replicating machines that would convert any matter they encountered into more copies of themselves. The hegemony's energy shields might as well have been made of paper. The flagship's death took 47 minutes. Its hull simply dissolved from the inside out, as billions of microscopic machines consumed everything they touched, turning one of the galaxy's mightiest vessels into an expanding cloud of identical nanobots. Supreme Admiral HFY managed to escape in a command pod, but his fleet was disintegrating around him. The humans weren't just fighting, they were demonstrating weapons that should have been impossible. Technologies that violated fundamental assumptions about warfare itself. A hegemony cruiser vanished as temporal mines created localized time dilation fields, aging the ship's crew to death in seconds while the vessel itself remained perfectly intact. Another battle group found themselves fighting duplicates of their own ship's matter. Transporters had created perfect copies that turned friendly fire into a strategic weapon. Fall back. HFY transmitted to all surviving vessels. Emergency. Jump to rally point 7. All ships. Immediate withdrawal. But even retreat became a nightmare. Human ships emerged from quantum stealth fields, appearing directly inside hegemony formations and detonating the time matter charges. That turned withdrawal into rout. Of the 2,347 vessels that had entered Sol System, fewer than 900 managed to escape. On Earth, Admiral Torrens watched the tactical display with hollow satisfaction. They had won this engagement, but at a cost that made victory feel like defeat. The weapons they deployed, the nanomachines, the temporal mines, the gravity bombs had taken decades to develop, and decades more to understand the moral implications of their use. Casualty reports coming in from the hegemony survivors. Director Osterholm said quietly, estimated dead for 100,000 sentients. Torrens closed her eyes. The galaxy had forced this choice upon them, but that didn't make the mathematics of slaughter any easier to bear. Ma'am, Communications Officer Vasquez's voice was strained. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. There, They're requesting a ceasefire, immediate negotiations. For the first time in months, Torrens smiled without humor. Tell them we're listening. The ceasefire lasted exactly 18 hours. It ended when the hegemony's final gambit arrived, the extinction fleet, commanded by war aspect Krithindel of the Void Collective, a species that had volunteered to be cybernetically enhanced. Specifically for this mission, their ships were black metal coffins filled with beings who had sacrificed their biological forms. For pure tactical efficiency, they came not to conquer, but to sterilize. No negotiations. Krithindel transmitted on all frequencies his voice, a synthesized harmony of 1,000 linked consciousnesses. No quarter, no survivors. The human plague ends today. The extinction fleet dropped out of hyperspace. In perfect tetrahedral formation, 800 vessels designed for one purpose: the complete elimination of biological life from targeted worlds. Their hulls were matte black, absorbing sensor, pings and light alike, making them appear as holes cut from reality itself. Admiral Torrens watched from Earth's primary command bunker as humanity's last reserves moved to intercept every ship, every platform, every desperate weapon system they'd held in reserve for this moment. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. This was the battle that would determine whether humanity survived as a species or became a footnote. In galactic history, all stations, this is Terra Command. Torrens broadcast to the fleet. Execute Order Omega. God help us all. Order Omega was humanity's final protocol, the strategic deployment of every prohibited weapon, every crime against nature, every technological horror they developed during their 27 years of isolation. There would be no holding back, no reserves, no tomorrow if they failed. The battle began at maximum range, 14 million kilometers from Earth's orbit. Captain Rex Volkov commanded the human dreadnought Apocalypse, leading Battlegroup Ragnarok, in a direct assault against the extinction fleet's center. His ship was 8 kilometers of compressed hatred fusion reactors, singularity generators, and weapons that existed in theoretical violation of several physical constants. Contact in 30 seconds, his tactical officer announced. Enemy vessels are not responding to scanner pings, stealth capabilities beyond our previous encounters. Then we'll have to do this the hard way. Volkov replied. All batteries, prepare for close engagement. Ramming speed. What followed was warfare, stripped of all pretense of civilization. Void Collective ships opened fire with weapons that didn't just destroy matter, they edited it out of existence entirely. Entire sections of human vessels simply ceased, leaving perfect spherical voids where armor and crew had been moments before. But humanity's response was equally horrifying. Apocalypse fired its primary weapon, a directed entropy beam that aged whatever it touched by millions of years and seconds. A collective dreadnought crumbled to cosmic dust as its atomic structure simply gave up the pretense of existing around them. The battle raged with intensity that turned space itself into a weapon. Human ships deployed temporal artillery that created causality loops, trapping enemy vessels in recursive destruction sequences. The collective responded with quantum viruses that infected human computers and turned them into explosive devices. Hull breach on decks 12 through 17. Damage control reported aboard Apocalypse. We've lost life support to the entire secondary hull. Seal the compartments and keep firing. Volkov ordered, even as another collective ship materialized directly above them, pouring existence deletion beams into their superstructure. The running battle lasted for hours and covered the entire inner solar system. Human defensive platforms around Mars opened fire with planet cracker munitions. Weapons designed to shatter worlds reduced to tactical implements. The collective responded by turning Jupiter's moons into kinetic bombardment platforms, accelerating satellite-sized objects to relativistic speeds. In the depths of the engagement, something unprecedented happened. Captain Sarah Chenokoi, commanding the experimental ship Prometheus, made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Her vessel was dying, hull breached in 17 places. Crew reduced to 12 survivors out of 300, but they still had one weapon left: humanity's ultimate violation of physical law. Engineering, prepare the null cascade generator, she ordered. Ma'am, if we detonate that here, the effect could propagate through the entire system. Better our system dies free than survives enslaved. Chen Okoi's voice was calm as death itself. All hands, prepare for cascade deployment. The weapon that detonated from Prometheus didn't just destroy the nearby collective ships. It temporarily broke the fundamental forces that held matter together. For a sphere 50,000 kilometers in radius, strong nuclear force simply stopped working. Atoms came apart peacefully, releasing energy in a pattern that looked like the most beautiful firework display in history. When the effect ended, 37 collective vessels had been reduced to component protons, and humanity had demonstrated a weapon that could theoretically unmake entire star systems. The extinction fleet's withdrawal began immediately. War-Aspect Krithindel, observing from his command ship, made a calculation that would haunt the galaxy for centuries. Humanity possessed weapons that could end not just civilizations, but the physical laws that made civilization possible. Full retreat, he transmitted to his remaining forces emergency protocols. Contact the Council immediately. Of the 800 ships that had entered Sol system to sterilize humanity, 216 survived to report their failure on Earth. Admiral Torrens stood in the ruins of her command center, reading casualty reports that made her stomach turn. Humanity had lost 40% of its space-based military assets. 4 billion humans had died in the bombardment of Earth's cities. Mars' colony was gone. The asteroid belt was a graveyard of twisted metal and nuclear fire. But they had won, against impossible odds, with weapons that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Humanity had demonstrated that extinction carried a price the galaxy might not be willing to pay. "Ma'am," Director Osterholm said quietly, "we're receiving another transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting unconditional negotiations." Torrens smiled without humor. "Tell them we're still listening." The Galactic Council's final solution arrived not as a fleet, but as a single ship. The Absolute Unity emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Sol system, a vessel so massive it briefly eclipsed the sun from Earth's perspective. 27 kilometers long, it wasn't a warship, but something far more dangerous, a planet killer, designed by the combined scientific might of the galaxy's 4 to 7 member species. Its purpose was simple: demonstrate to humanity that some things were inevitable. Chancellor Zerek Tail of the Eternal Dominion stood on the bridge of the great ship, surrounded by the galaxy's greatest military minds. They had watched the extinction fleet's defeat with growing horror, witnessed weapons that defied rational thought, and reached a unanimous conclusion: humanity could not be allowed to exist. "Planetary destruction sequence is charging," reported the weapons coordinator, a cybernetic entity that was more computer than being. Estimated time to complete solar sterilization, 17 minutes. Admiral Torrens watched from Earth's deepest command bunker as the great ship positioned itself for humanity's final judgment. Every defensive platform, every hidden weapon, every desperate stratagem they'd employed had delayed, but not prevented this moment. "Ma'am," Director Osterholm said quietly, "all civilian evacuation transports are either destroyed or trapped in system. We've managed to save approximately 40,000 people on deep space vessels, but 4 billion would die when Absolute Unity fired. The mathematics were inescapable. Signal all remaining fleet assets," Torrens ordered. "Full-scale assault on the target. Everything we have left." What remained of humanity's Space Navy 37 ships of various classes accelerated toward certain death. They had no chance of penetrating the great ship's defenses, but the alternative was watching their species die without striking back. The battle was pathetically one-sided. Absolute Unity possessed energy shields that absorbed entire antimatter, detonations without fluctuation. Its defensive systems eliminated incoming missiles before they could approach effective range. The great ship didn't even bother to return fire. As human vessels destroyed themselves against its defenses, Captain Elena Martinez, commanding the last functional human dreadnought, watched her weapons fire harmlessly dissipate against alien force fields around her. The remnants of humanity's fleet died with desperate courage, achieving nothing except proving they would not surrender. "Ma'am," her weapons officer said quietly, "we're reading massive energy buildup from the target's primary weapon. They're preparing to fire on Absolute Unity." Chancellor Zerek Tail felt something approaching satisfaction as the planet killer reached full charge. The weapon would not just destroy Earth, it would sterilize every world in the system, convert the sun itself into a weapon that would burn away every trace of human DNA. "Fire," he commanded. The beam that lanced from Absolute Unity contained the concentrated energy output of 1,000 stars, focused through gravitic lenses into a stream of pure annihilation. It struck Earth's upper atmosphere and began the process that would reduce humanity's birth world to cosmic dust. But something Impossible happened. Instead of dying, Earth began to sing. Planet's entire surface erupted in harmonious vibration of frequency that resonated through hyperspace, through quantum foam, through the fundamental structure of reality itself. It was a sound that every sentient being in the galaxy could hear, regardless of species or location. It was humanity's death song, and it was beautiful. Deep beneath the Mariana Trench, Project Lazarus revealed its true nature. Not a weapon, but a broadcast system, a quantum transmitter that had been recording every moment of humanity's struggle, every act of courage, every desperate choice made in the face of extinction. And now it was sharing those memories with every conscious mind in the galaxy. Chancellor Zerek Tail staggered as alien emotions flooded his consciousness. He experienced the sensation of human parents kissing their children goodbye before reporting for hopeless military service. He felt the determination of engineers who worked 18-hour shifts building weapons they knew couldn't save them. He lived through the last moments of human soldiers who died by in seconds for evacuation transports across the galaxy. 47 different species experienced humanity's final hours through human eyes. They felt the species' refusal to surrender, not from pride, but from love for their children, their cultures, their right to exist as they chose. The absolute unity's planet killer beam faltered, then died entirely as its crew experienced the full weight of what they were destroying. Chancellor, the weapons coordinator said, his synthesized voice carrying unfamiliar emotion, "I cannot continue the bombardment. The ethical subroutines are overriding combat protocols." Zerek Tail looked around his bridge and saw the same expression on every face, the horrified realization that they had come to commit genocide against beings whose only crime was refusing to submit. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "All vessels, stand down. Terminate the bombardment on Earth." Admiral Torrance felt the alien weapon's energy signature fade and allowed herself to believe in miracles. Humanity's final gambit, not a weapon of mass destruction, but a weapon of mass understanding, had achieved what all their military might could not. The galaxy finally understood what they were trying to destroy. "Ma'am," Communications Officer Vasquez reported, her voice filled with wonder. "We're receiving transmission from Absolute Unity. They're requesting permission to send medical aid." 3 years later, Admiral Vera Torrance stood before the restored Galactic Council as humanity's first official representative. The Great Chamber that had once debated her species' quarantine now hosted delegates from 53 different civilizations, including the newest member of the galactic community. The chamber was silent as she prepared to address the assembly that had once condemned her people to isolation and death. "Honorable delegates," Torrance began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. "I stand before you not as a conqueror, but as a teacher. 3 years ago, you sought to destroy humanity because we represented chaos in your ordered galaxy. Today, I'm here to explain why that chaos is precisely what you need." She gestured to the holographic display that materialized above the chamber's center. Images of the Sol system as it existed now: Earth, scarred but healing; Mars, being rebuilt with technologies that merged human innovation with galactic engineering; the asteroid belt, transformed from a weapons platform into the galaxy's most productive manufacturing center. But the most remarkable changes weren't physical. Since the Lazarus broadcast, 47 species have reported significant advances in creative arts, scientific innovation, and philosophical development. Torrance continued, "The Kelvaran Empire has produced its first original literature in 3 centuries. The triumvirate conquered has begun questioning social structures that haven't changed in millennia. Even the Void Collective has started exploring individual consciousness alongside their collective experience. In the delegate galleries, beings who had once voted for humanity's extinction now listened with something approaching reverence. The war had ended not with surrender or victory, but with understanding, and that understanding had changed everyone involved." Chancellor Zerek Tail, now serving as the Council's Ethical Oversight Committee chair, rose to address the assembly. "The honorable human representative speaks truth. We came to Sol System to eliminate what we perceived as a threat to galactic stability. Instead, we discovered that our stability was stagnation." He paused, considering words that would have been impossible before the broadcast. "Humans showed us that survival sometimes requires the courage to become something new." Their resistance wasn't mere defiance, it was evolution in real time. The formal proceedings continued for hours, establishing treaties and trade agreements. that would govern humanity's integration into galactic society. But the real transformation had already occurred during those desperate weeks, when a single species had reminded the galaxy what it meant to fight for something worth preserving. Director Kane Osterholm, now serving as Earth's Minister of Galactic Affairs, met with Torrens in the Council Complex's gardens afterward. The artificial environment was beautiful in its perfection to perfect. They both agreed. Any regrets? He asked, watching alien equivalents of birds move through precisely maintained foliage. About the weapons we used, about the casualties we inflicted. Torrens shook her head. We did what we had to do to survive. But I'm glad we found a way to end it without becoming monsters. Some would argue we became monsters the moment we developed planet killers and causality weapons. Maybe, but we also became something else, a species willing to share our worst impulses along with our best ones. The Lazarus broadcast showed them everything, our capacity for violence, our willingness to commit terrible acts, our absolute refusal to surrender our humanity even at the cost of our lives. Osterholm smiled grimly, and somehow, that convinced them we were worthy of joining their civilization, not joining. Torrens corrected. Changing. The galaxy that invited us to membership isn't the same one that tried to sterilize Sol System. We forced them to evolve, just as they forced us to become more than we were. In the years that followed, historians would debate whether humanity's integration into galactic society represented victory or compromise. The weapons that had shocked the galaxy were dismantled under international supervision, but the knowledge that created them became the foundation for technologies that benefited everyone. The aggression that had terrified civilized beings was channeled into exploration, innovation, and the kind of progress that comes from refusing to accept limitations. But perhaps the most important change was philosophical. The galaxy had spent millennia believing that civilization required the suppression of dangerous impulses. That progress meant the elimination of conflict, chaos, and uncertainty. Humanity's violent resistance had forced them to confront a troubling question. What happened when the price of peace was the death of growth itself? The answer came in the form of what historians would later call the Renaissance wave, a period of unprecedented innovation and cultural development that swept through galactic civilization. In the decades following the Sol War, species that had remained unchanged for centuries began experimenting with new forms of government, art, and science. The order of perfection that had defined galactic society gave way to something messier, more dangerous, but infinitely more alive. 10 years after the war, Admiral Torrens returned to Sol System, aboard the New Horizon, a vessel that represented the best of human and galactic engineering. As Earth grew larger in the viewports, she thought about the children who were now growing up in a galaxy where humans served alongside beings their parents had once fought. Her own granddaughter, Maya, was part of the first mixed species crew to explore the galaxy's outer rim. Humans working alongside Kelvran philosophers, triumvirate engineers, and even reformed Void collective scouts. They were mapping unknown regions not as conquerors, but as partners in the greatest adventure any of them could imagine. Admiral, Captain Liu Wei said from the bridge, "We're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's the anniversary ceremony." Torrens nodded and activated the ship's communications array on screens throughout the vessel. The ceremony came into view. Delegates from across the galaxy, gathering in the rebuilt Geneva spaceport to commemorate the end of the Sol War. But this wasn't a celebration of victory, it was a remembrance of transformation. The memorial wall displayed the names of every being, human and alien, who had died during those desperate weeks for billion humans, but also the hundreds of thousands of hegemony personnel who had perished in battles they believed were righteous. The war had been won not through superior firepower, but through the terrible courage required to show an enemy exactly who you were, without pretense or apology. Director Osterholm, now elderly but still sharp, stepped forward to read the memorial inscription that had been carved in 4 to 7 different languages. Here we remember those who died not for conquest, but for the right to remain themselves. They taught us that survival sometimes requires becoming more than you were, and that the highest form of victory is helping your enemies discover their own capacity for growth. As the ceremony concluded, Torrens received a private message on her personal communicator. The sender was War Aspect Krithindel, the cybernetic commander who had led the extinction fleet against Earth. "Admiral Torrens, I wanted you to know that my collective has completed its philosophical integration project. We have learned to value individual consciousness alongside collective efficiency. Our children, yes, We have children now will grow up in a galaxy where diversity is strength rather than threat. Thank you for teaching us that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems hopeless." Torrance smiled and sent a brief reply. "Thank you for learning to listen when we sang our death song. The galaxy is better because we found a way to stop trying to destroy each other." The New Horizon continued its journey through the system, past Mars, where human and alien engineers worked side by side on terraforming projects, past the asteroid belt where former weapons platforms had been converted into research stations and cultural centers. In the outer system, construction crews were building the first generation of truly integrated starships vessels, designed by multiple species working in harmony rather than competition. But perhaps the most remarkable sight was Earth itself, its surface dotted with cities that blended human architecture with alien aesthetics, gardens where impossible flowers bloomed under foreign stars, thanks to atmospheric processors that made Earth capable of supporting dozens of different biochemistries simultaneously. The planet that had nearly been sterilized had become a symbol of what the galaxy could achieve when different forms of life chose cooperation over conquest. As Torrance prepared for her final retirement, she reflected on the strange path that had led from humanity's desperate isolation to their integration into something larger than any single species could achieve alone. The galaxy had tried to force them to surrender their essential nature, and humanity's refusal had ultimately saved both sides from the stagnation that came with perfect order. The war hymn that had once echoed through hyperspace as a death song had become something else entirely, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful harmonies came from voices that refused to sing in unison, choosing instead to create something new from their differences. In the end, the galaxy hadn't celebrated humanity's fall. They had mourned their own blindness, and in learning to see through human eyes, they had discovered what they had been missing all along: the courage to become more than they were.